رمضان تجلى وابتسم، طوبى للعبد إذا اغتنما، أرضى مولاه بما التزما، طوبى للنفس بتقواها. رمضان زمان البركات، رمضان زمان الحسنات.
الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. دعاء الافتتاح لليوم 26 من شهر رمضان المبارك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أدعوك كما أمرتني، فاستجب لي كما وعدتني، إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. اللهم إني أفتتح الثناء بحمدك، وأنت مسدد للصواب بمنك، وأيقنت أنك أنت أرحم الراحمين في موضع العفو والرحمة، وأشد المعاقبين في موضع النكال والنقمة، وأعظم المتجبرين في موضع الكبرياء والعظمة. اللهم أذنت لي في دعائك ومسألتك، فاسمع يا سميع مدحتي، وأجب يا رحيم دعوتي، وأقل يا غفور عثرتي. فكم يا إلهي من كربة قد فرجتها، وهموم قد كشفتها، وعثرة قد أقلتها، ورحمة قد نشرتها، وحلقة بلاء قد فككتها. الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، ولم يكن له شريك في الملك، ولم يكن له ولي من الذل، وكبره تكبيرا. الحمد لله بجميع محامده كلها، على جميع نعمه كلها. الحمد لله الذي لا مضاد له في ملكه، ولا منازع له في أمره. والحمد لله الذي لا شريك له في خلقه، ولا شبيه له في عظمته. الحمد لله الفاشي في الخلق أمره وحمده، الظاهر بالكرم مجده، الباسط بالجود يده، الذي لا تنقص خزائنه، ولا تزيده كثرة العطاء إلا جودا وكرما. إنه هو العزيز الوهاب. اللهم إني أسألك قليلا من كثير، مع حاجة بي إليه عظيمة، وغناك عنه قديم، وهو عندي كثير، وهو عليك سهل يسير.
اللهم إن عفوك عن ذنبي وتجاوزك عن خطيئتي وصفحك عن ظلمي وسترك على قبيح عملي وحلمك عن كثير جرمي عندما كان من خطئي وعمدي أطمعني في أن أسألك ما لا أستوجبه منك الذي رزقتني من رحمتك وأريتني من قدرتك وعرفتني من إجابتك فصرت أدعوك آمنا وأسألك مستأنسا لا خائفا ولا وجلا مدلا عليك فيما قصدت فيه إليك فإن أبطأ عني عتبت بجهلي عليك ولعل الذي أبطأ عني هو خير لي لعلمك بعاقبة الأمور فلم أرى مولا كريما أصبر على عبد لئيم منك علي يا رب إنك تدعوني فأولي عنك وتتحبب إلي فأتبغض إليك وتتودد إلي فلا أقبل منك كأن لي التطول عليك فلم يمنعك ذلك من الرحمة لي والإحسان إلي والتفضل علي بجودك وكرمك فارحم عبدك الجاهل وجد عليه بفضل إحسانك إنك جواد كريم الحمد لله مالك الملك مجري الفلك مسخر الرياح فالق الإصباح ديان الدين رب العالمين الحمد لله على حلمه بعد علمه والحمد لله على عفوه بعد قدرته والحمد لله على طول أناته في غضبه وهو قادر على ما يريد الحمد لله خالق الخلق باسط الرزق فالق الإصباح ذي الجلال والإكرام والفضل والإنعام الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى الحمد لله الذي ليس له منازع يعادله ولا شبيه يشاكله ولا ظهير يعاضده قهر بعزته الأعزاء وتواضع لعظمته العظماء فبلغ بقدرته ما يشاء الحمد لله الذي يجيبني حين أناديه ويستر علي كل عورة وأنا أعصيه ويعظم النعمة علي فلا أجازيه فكم من موهبة هنيئة قد أعطاني وعظيمة مخوفة قد كفاني وبهجة مونقة قد أراني فأثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا الحمد لله الذي لا يهتك حجابه ولا يغلق بابه ولا يرد سائله ولا يخيب آمله الحمد لله الذي يؤمن الخائفين وينجي الصالحين ويرفع المستضعفين ويضع المستكبرين ويهلك ملوكا ويستخلف آخرين والحمد لله قاسم الجبارين مبير الظالمين، مدرك الهاربين، نكال الظالمين، صريخ المستصرخين، موضع حاجات الطالبين، معتمد المؤمنين. الحمد لله الذي من خشيته ترعد السماء وسكانها، وترجف الأرض وعمارها، وتموج البحار ومن يسبح في غمراتها. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. الحمد لله الذي يخلق ولم يخلق، ويرزق ولا يرزق، ويطعم ولا يطعم، ويميت الأحياء ويحيي الموتى، وهو حي لا يموت، بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وصفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك، وحافظ سرك ومبلغ رسالاتك، أفضل وأحسن وأجمل وأكمل وأزكى وأنمى وأطيب وأطهر وأسنى، وأكثر ما صليت وباركت وترحمت وتحننت وسلمت على أحد من عبادك وأنبيائك ورسلك وصفوتك وأهل الكرامة عليك من خلقك. اللهم وصل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين، عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم. وصل على الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين، وصل على سبطي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة، وصل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي، حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في بلادك صلاة كثيرة دائمة. اللهم وصل على ولي أمرك القائم المؤمل والعدل المنتظر، وحفه بملائكتك المقربين، وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعله الداعي إلى كتابك والقائم بدينك، استخلفه في الأرض كما استخلفت الذين من قبله، مكن له دينه الذي ارتضيته له، أبدله من بعد خوفه أمنا، يعبدك لا يشرك بك شيئا. اللهم أعزه وأعزز به، وانصره وانتصر به، وانصره نصرا عزيزا، وافتح له فتحا يسيرا، واجعل له من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. اللهم أظهر به دينك وسنة نبيك حتى لا يستخفي بشيء من الحق مخافة أحد من الخلق. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله، وتذل بها النفاق وأهله، وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك، وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملناه، وما قصرنا عنه فبلغناه. اللهم المم به شعثنا، واشعب به صدعنا، وارتق به فتقنا، وكثر به قلتنا، وأعزز به ذلتنا، وأغن به عائلنا، واقض به عن مغرمنا، واجبر به فقرنا، وسد به خلتنا، ويسر به عسرنا، وبيض به وجوهنا، وفك به أسرنا، وأنجح به طلبتنا، وأنجز به مواعيدنا، واستجب به دعوتنا، وأعطنا به سؤلنا، وبلغنا به من الدنيا والآخرة آمالنا، وأعطنا به فوق رغبتنا يا خير المسؤولين وأوسع المعطين. اشف به صدورنا، وأذهب به غيظ قلوبنا، واهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك، إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. وانصرنا به على عدوك وعدونا إله الحق. آمين. اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله، وغيبة ولينا، وكثرة عدونا، وقلة عددنا، وشدة الفتن بنا، وتظاهر الزمان علينا. فصل على محمد وآله، وأعنا على ذلك كله بفتح منك تعجله، وبضر تكشفه، ونصر تعزه، وسلطان حق تظهره، ورحمة منك تجللناها، وعافية منك تلبسناها. اللهم برحمتك في الصالحين فأدخلنا، وفي عليين فارفعنا، وبكأس من معين من عين سلسبيل فاسقنا، ومن الحور العين برحمتك فزوجنا، ومن الولدان المخلدين كأنهم لؤلؤ مكنون فأخدمنا، ومن ثمار الجنة ولحوم الطير فأطعمنا، ومن ثياب السندس والحرير والاستبرق فألبسنا، وليلة القدر، وحج بيتك الحرام، وقتلا في سبيلك فوفق لنا، وصالح الدعاء والمسألة فاستجب لنا. وإذا جمعت الأولين والآخرين يوم القيامة فارحمنا، وبراءة من النار فاكتب لنا، وفي جهنم فلا تغلنا، وفي عذابك وهوانك فلا تبتلنا، ومن الزقوم والضريع فلا تطعمنا، ومع الشياطين فلا تجعلنا، وفي النار على وجوهنا فلا تكببنا، ومن ثياب النار وسرابيل القتران فلا تلبسنا، ومن كل سوء يا لا إله إلا أنت، بحق لا إله إلا أنت فنجنا. إلهي وقف السائلون ببابك، ولاذ الفقراء بجنابك، ووقفت سفينة المساكين على ساحل بحر جودك وكرمك يرجون الجواز إلى ساحة رحمتك ونعمتك. إلهي إن كنت لا ترحم في هذا الشهر الشريف إلا لمن أخلص لك في صيامه وقيامه، فمن للمذنب المقصر إذا غرق في بحر ذنوبه وآثامه. إلهي إن كنت لا ترحم إلا المطيعين فمن للعاصين، وإن كنت لا تقبل إلا من العاملين فمن للمقصرين. إلهي ربح الصائمون وفاز القائمون ونجا المخلصون، ونحن عبيدك المذنبون، فارحمنا برحمتك واعتقنا من النار بعفوك، واغفر لنا ذنوبنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. أعوذ بجلال وجهك الكريم أن ينقضي عني شهر رمضان، أو يطلع الفجر من ليلتي هذه ولك قبلي تبعة أو ذنب تعذبني عليه يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.
لاستجابة الدعاء ولشفاء المرضى ولفكاك الأسرى ولشفاء الجرحى ولنصر المجاهدين ولأرواح أمواتنا جميعا. الفاتحة مشفوعة بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.
رمضان مجال الصلوات تسمو بالنفس لمولاها. رمضان يكفر ما فرط من خطأ الناس وما اختلط، فعسى من عفو الله عطا لقلوب الأمة يرعاها. رمضان تجلى وابتسم طوبى للعبد إذا اغتنما. رمضان تجلى وابتسم طوبى للعبد إذا اغتنما. أرضى مولاه بما التزم طوبى للنفس بتقواها. رمضان زمان البركات، رمضان زمان الحسنات، رمضان مجال الصلوات تسمو بالنفس لمولاها. رمضان يكفر ما فرط من خطأ الناس وما اختلط، فعسى من عفو الله عطا لقلوب الأمة يرعاها. رمضان تجلى وابتسم طوبى للعبد إذا اغتنما. رمضان تجلى.
الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولما برزوا لجالوت وجنوده قالوا ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. فهزموهم بإذن الله وقتل داود جالوت وآتاه الله الملك والحكمة وعلمه مما يشاء ولولا دفع الله الناس بعضهم ببعض لفسدت الأرض ولكن الله ذو فضل على العالمين. تلك آيات الله نتلوها عليك بالحق وإنك لمن المرسلين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على رسول الله وآله الأطهار على رسول الله وآله الأطهار. صلوات.
Can we give Brother Ahsan another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad? Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Inshallah, Allah yataqabbal all your amal with 3 days left of Shahr Ramadan. I truly want to wish you guys that we all finish off strong and we get most of what's left of this blessed month. Just a few reminders. Inshallah, Wednesday we will have a lecture or a discussion about Dua Hamza Abu Thamali with Brother Abu Khadr here in the hall, as well as inshallah our Eid celebration will be Friday, if it is the sighting is correct, inshallah. Without further ado, we'd love to welcome Sheikh Ahmad Shiri with 3 loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala ali
وابتسم طوبى للعبد إذا اغتنما أرضى مولاه بما التزما طوبى للنفس بتقواها رمضان زمان البركات.
الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. I begin in the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. May the peace and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon His final messenger, Muhammad, and his blessed and purified progeny. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers, dear sisters, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yesterday we began a discussion on taqwa, and we wanted to highlight the fact that taqwa is usually translated as fear of God. And we wanted to say that taqwa does not entail fear per se. Taqwa is about self-restraint, and that fear of God is not fear of God as in God is a horrifying God or a scary God. Rather, it is fear of God's justice, meaning knowing that God is just, we have to be aware of our actions. Inshallah, we want to continue the discussion on taqwa, the self-restraint today, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I'm going to bring two examples from Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam regarding taqwa. In the first, he describes taqwa as, he compares taqwa to the horse rider, the individual that has taqwa. And the second, he describes it as a home. In the first narration, Imam Ali alayhi salam says, beware that sins are like unruly horses, meaning untamed horses, on whom their riders have been placed, and their reins have been let loose, so that they would jump with them in hell. So I say that sins are like unruly horses. The rider is the individual. He's been placed on the reins and let loose. So you can picture the scenario where you're dealing with an untamed horse. Who is the one that is in control? Does the individual who's riding the horse decide that it is going right, left, forward? Or is the horse making a decision? Beware that piety, taqwa, is like trained horses on which the riders have been placed with the reins in their hands so that they would take the riders to heaven. Here, the definition of taqwa is to control or dominate the soul. So again, taqwa here is defined as what? Self-control. That the individual who has taqwa has willpower, has control, has domination over their souls. They decide which direction they're going. They're not being dragged right and left and forward in any direction. They decide where they're going, right? And this is, again, where free will comes into play. You have that free will to make that decision. And a person who is not strong enough to disobey his desires and surrenders his control or her control to his or her soul is compared to an unskilled rider on an untamed horse who lacks willpower. Now, this lack of willpower is a very common complaint. It's a very common complaint, especially in these days and age, right? People are complaining that I don't have the willpower. Many of the people that come in privately and we speak, they say, I've tried time and time again to rid myself of a certain sin, but I always end up falling back onto it. I don't have the willpower. I feel like I lose control. Gaining that willpower, gaining that control is possible through what? Through taqwa, increasing that piety. So the prerequisite of taqwa is self-control, meaning the more control you have over yourself, the more pious of an individual you can be. How do we do that? In the Managing Emotions lecture, we talked about the powers within the human being. And we said the superior, the king amongst those powers is the intellect. So the individual who wants to have self-control or who has self-control is the one whose intellect is the one that is superior, that has dominion over themselves. Right? You use this intellect to combat those desires. Your intellect is what helps you strengthen your intellect. You look for the things that strengthen the intellect. So we said the other powers, they get involved. How? When you begin to let loose. You allow those powers to gain dominance over yourself. Small practices, they're small things, brothers and sisters, that we consider small, but they add up, they become detrimental. Taking it easy when it comes to what we eat, how we spend, who we spend our time with, the things that we do, the shows that we watch, the things that we hear, the conversations we partake in. When we take it easy, that means we're allowing our desires to take the reins and pull us in any direction. Whilst the individual who has self-control decides the fate of their life. And I'm not saying here decides their fate as in with major decisions. What do I want to do in the future? Who do I want to marry? What degree am I going to get? Where I'm going to live? What purchase do I want to make? No, it's those small decisions that we consider small that lead to that lack of self-control. Like what? What time do I eat? What time do I wake up? What time do I perform my ibadah? Am I praying on time or not? The lack of a schedule, that chaotic life, is what leads to these things, right? When we take it lightly and we say, okay, well, when I feel like it, I'll do it. Well, that means you're letting your feelings determine where you're going. You're not letting your intellect. You are not the master of your life. You're not in control of your life. Something else is, and you surrender that control. You have the ability to take control, but you've voluntarily, willingly given control to your desires. So how do we get that control back? By putting a program in our life. Knowing when I'm going to eat, what I'm going to eat. We said even with regards to prayer, before going into prayer, knowing what I'm going to say in prayer, knowing what I'm going to do. With the brothers and sisters, when we talked about intrusive thoughts, we said one of the ways to eliminate intrusive thoughts in prayer is what? One of the practical ways is even if a thought, a whisper comes to you and tells you to do something, either it gives you a bad image or it gives you a good suggestion, right? You're in prayer, you're going into ruku', you say, Subhana Rabbi al-Azim wa bihamdih. And then something whispers, say, it would be good if you say Subhanallah, Subhanallah, Subhanallah. Don't pay attention to it. Why? Because that's not you that made that thought. That was a suggestion made to you, right? It was a suggestion made to you. If you keep following and listening to these suggestions, you begin to empower them. When you go into prayer, go in knowing what you're going to say, not thinking about it when you're praying. Because if you think about the words, you're not connected with God. You have to know exactly what you're going to say, so that any intrusive thought, be it positive or negative, does not influence your behavior whatsoever. Doesn't influence your decision making whatsoever. You know exactly what you're doing because you've decided what to say. You've decided how to behave. And that's the difference. That's the first step to gaining that control over your mind, where you begin to ignore these whispers. Is that thought, Jazakallah alf khair, shukran. Is that thought, does it belong to me or is it a suggestion? And that applies to everything else in life, whether it be in prayer and everything else. These suggestions, the moment we listen to them, right, the moment we begin to be impulsive individuals and we don't have self-restraint, self-control, then prepare for 100 other thoughts. When you empower them, they have control over you. Now, when you ignore them the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time, and so on, are they going to get weaker? You say, well, I've tried it several times, it hasn't gone away yet. It takes time. It's a long process. It's not a short process. But you have to set your mind to it and stick to it. Remember, right? It's a battle. You're on an untamed horse. It's going to be taking you. You don't tame it in a few minutes, right? And even if you tame it after a while, it's used to being untamed. Every once in a while, it's going to try to set itself free again. And you have to make sure that you grab the reins and you grab it strongly. What can we do if we slip up? One of the things that you can do if you slip up, create a punishment system for yourself. Yesterday in the Q&A, I spoke about it a little bit in terms of self-discipline. I said that the parent disciplines the child, right? And the laws of a country discipline a society, discipline a civilian within the society, a civil law, right? Self-discipline means you are disciplining yourself. Meaning you put a consequence for your action, right? You know that God is watching you, and you consider yourself a mature individual, and you have your own right to make your own choices, and you're deciding your life and so on. Okay, great. So now you have to discipline yourself, meaning if I slip up, I have to take away something from myself that I like. I've been waiting, for example, to watch a sports match, or I'm waiting to, go out and grab a cup of coffee with somebody. But I slipped up in my self-discipline. I slipped up with regards to myself and maybe committed a sin or committed a mistake. I gave in to my desires, right? It doesn't have to always be a sin. Brothers and sisters, we got to get out of this mindset of it's just halal and haram. It's not just halal and haram, right? The love of this world is the greatest threat to the individual. But loving the world in and of itself is not a sin per se, from a fiqhi perspective. So it's not a matter of just halal and haram. It's beyond that. It's that mindset where I'm seeking what? The pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if I know something displeases God, I stay away from it. So if I've committed even something permitted, but I've caved in to my desires, how do I discipline myself? I take away something from myself. I say, this is how I'm disciplining it. Take away something that it likes. And I have to stick through to the end. Because a lot of people, as soon as they try to discipline themselves, the whisper comes in. You'll do it later. It doesn't matter. It's something that you like. You're going to be bored. Okay, be bored. But you're making yourself pay the price. That's the only way we can discipline ourselves. The only way we can discipline ourselves. In another narration, Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam describes taqwa as a strong house. He says, know, O servants of Allah, that piety, taqwa, is a strong house of protection, while impiety is a weak house which does not protect its people, and does not give security to him who takes refuge therein. So, taqwa is self-restraint. Now, taqwa is always described in these two ways. One, that the self-restraint protects you, and that you protect it. So it goes both ways. It protects you, and you have a responsibility to protect it as well. Make sure that you remain in that state. We said Shahr Ramadan, you're trying to preserve that state throughout the rest of the year. What you've gained, right? You don't want to lose it immediately. Now that the month ended, we go back to our old ways. We want to improve. Why? Because we made promises to God on Laylatul Qadr. We promised Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I'm going to change my life. So how do I preserve that? Knowing that I have a history of what? Falling back. Now I want for once in my life to move forward. So how do I do that? By protecting that taqwa, and in turn it protects me. It goes both ways. So a strong house, described as a strong house of protection. And impiety, lack of taqwa, is a weak house which does not protect its people and does not give security to him who takes refuge therein. Again, picture this scenario. The description here is a house. If it's a house that protects the individual, what does the house protect the individual from? Well, the first thing that might come to mind is the weather, right? We're in Michigan, we have a lot of storms, and now it's cold again, so that's the first thing that comes to mind. Right? The rain and the snow, they say at least you have a roof over your head. What's the roof protecting you from? Either the rain or the snow or even the heat of the sun. It's a shelter. It's a shelter for an individual. There's other things that the house protects the individual from. Animals, right? Why I say animals? Because the example given in the books of akhlaq with regards to the desire, they compare the desire to a rabid wild dog that's going to attack your home. They say, okay, well, you have this lust within you, you have this sensual desire within you. And people complain that I'm not able to contain that desire. That's the one most people struggle with, that lust. They say, how can I control it? The ulama of akhlaq say, imagine you have a home. And this home is what? Home is taqwa, right? According to Amir al-Mu'minin. So you have this home, and you know that there's a dog outside of this home, and this dog is barking, it's wild, right? It looks vicious, it's going to attack the home. Now, what would you do in that case? Would you keep your door open? No, you'd close the door. He says, but some people, they don't close the door, right? The dog here is what? Your desires. So some people don't close the door. Some people keep the door open a little bit, just a little bit. And they say, I'm safe, I'm good, right? But that dog easily can go and push the door open and come in. And once it's in the house, you can't get it out. And that's the problem. Once the dog is in, it's going to overpower you. Or while you're trying to get it out, you're going to make a mistake, you're going to get cut, it's going to bite you, you can't get it out safely. So what does the intellect tell you? What does your intellect tell you the wise person does? Keeps the door closed in the first place. So what's this example trying to tell us? It's trying to tell us that we know that there are things, triggers, that trigger our desires. When you take sin lightly, it's like keeping that door open. You know, if I hang out with this person, I go on this social media, I use my phone at this time, right? I'm more likely to fall into sin. I'm in this gathering, I'm more likely to fall into sin. I'm in this place, I'm more likely to fall into sin. But then you say, you know what, it's just one time, I want to hang out with them, it's just one time, I'm bored, I want to open my phone, I want to go online. Let me see what they're saying. And then you come across something, and then the fire of passion is lit, and you fall into sin. It says, here you have yourself to blame because you left the door open. You didn't close it completely. You let the dog in. And then you struggle, right? Because fighting against the ability to commit that sin, the temptation to commit that sin is tough. And you might make a mistake alongside the way and you become injured. And then you enter a sad or anxious state. Why did I do this to myself again? You know, how many times am I going to commit this mistake? And then those thoughts begin recycling once again through your mind. They say, close the door to that house in the first place. Taqwa is a house that protects the individuals that are within it, the servants of Allah that are within it. You know your triggers. If you don't, begin to analyze yourself. What triggers me? If I'm no good around certain social media, and that social media is normalized, let me stay off of it. Just until I have better control over myself. If I can eliminate it completely, then great. If not, then let me wait until I'm in a state where I have better strength. I've created a barrier around my heart where I can be in the atmosphere without allowing it to intercept, without allowing it to affect me. So different challenges can be like storms. One can reflect as well on the seasons. Meaning the individual spiritual life is also seasonal, right? Shahr Ramadan, as we mentioned, is one of those seasons where the door of divine mercy is more widely open. We have to take advantage of those seasons. Take advantage of that time. So taqwa, in reality, what does it become? It's a spiritual power within you. That's your spiritual power. That piety is your spiritual power. That the prerequisite for is what? Self-restraint. In Surah Al-A'raf, verse 26, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O children of Adam, we have certainly sent down to you garments to cover your nakedness and for adornment, garments, clothing. Yet the garment of God-weariness, taqwa, that is the best. That is one of Allah's signs so that you may take admonition, take heed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that He sent you what? Clothes, garments to cover your physical body. Notice again the language of the Quran. It speaks to what? Your feelings, it speaks to your intellect. It's telling you think, contemplate how much attention you put to the clothes on your body, yet you leave your soul empty and unprotected. Clothes, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, garments to cover your nakedness and for adornment. So, why? Because clothes protect the individual as well. They're a form of protection. Adornment is one other function of clothing. Now, clothing is not used for its utilitarian purposes anymore. Now it has a greater purpose in our day and age. Back in the day, you know, at least historically, historians try to say that clothing has a utilitarian function. The function of clothing, they say, protect the individual during winter, and that's why they made wool clothing and so on. They wore layers. In Europe, they say there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing, meaning the function of clothing is to protect the individual. Saying here, just as we've sent you a physical sign, that's why contemplation, tadabbur is important, tafakkur is important, right? Just as we sent you a physical clothing to protect yourself, what have you done for your soul? Your soul also requires, he said, the best of clothing is God-wariness, is taqwa. It protects your soul from that which is around it, right? You can protect your body, but within, you're dissatisfied with yourself. You're not happy. You're not living a happy life. You're not living a content life. Or you might say, we don't want to emphasize a lack of happiness. You can say you're happy, but that happiness is temporary, right? You keep going up and down, up and down. It's like a sugar rush, you know? You hit a peak. You're extremely happy in a gathering, and then the next day, you're not happy with yourself. And you have to distract yourself again. And then your life becomes that cycle again and again and again. We can all relate to that. We're all going through the same struggle. We're all on the same boat, right? So here, he's saying that take heed. Take heed. One thing I want to mention, because the subject of clothing came up, and it's important to note. Most people don't think about this. Now, a lot of brothers and sisters, they put financial goals within their life. And we talked about how Islamically, you should strive to reach a point financially where you're not a burden on anybody, meaning you're financially independent. You're not only independent, but it's better if you're able to help others as well. But the ideal state is you reach a point in your life where I'm financially independent of family members, of my community, of those around me, of the government, of anybody. I'm making my own money. I'm not a burden on anybody. Everybody's safe from my own harm. I'm not living off of anybody's effort or tax money or anybody that's worked hard, anybody's efforts in working to gain that money. That's the ideal state that one reaches. I want to add here, because we have a lot of brothers and sisters that like to wear brand clothing, right? And they work hard, you know. Some of them, they don't have the best jobs, right? And they're working jobs that have average wages. And they strive so hard to save up money to buy that bag or that hoodie or that shirt or that shoe from a certain company. Here I want to point out that if we want to live moral and upright lives, which is an obligation because we're Muslims, right? We have to be moral in not just one aspect of our lives, in every aspect of our lives, right? Or else what? We're hypocrites. I want to point out the fact that there's child labor involved in majority of these brands that we're striving to purchase. And we can't be unconscious or pretend that that doesn't exist. A lot of these brands that are out there, they use child labor. They take kids from schools and from homes, and they're not able to get an education. And they're forced to work in those factories. The International Labor Organization estimates that 170 million are engaged in child labor. We're talking 7-year-old kids, 9-year-old kids, engaged in child labor. Doing what? Picking cotton. The same companies that you go, you buy Zara, any other of these, H&M, you look and you say, where is it made? In Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, India. Child labor is being involved. We're taking part in that by purchasing these items. You want to save up money? Because to buy ethical clothing is not cheap. To buy one shirt that's ethically made will probably cost you maybe $50, probably $75 for one shirt. It's not cheap. So I'm not saying that it's a feasible option. I'm just saying if you want to make money and your goal is to get better and become more financially capable, do it for a good reason. So I'm able to buy clothes that don't use child labor. That's a good goal to have. That's another way we can even make our working and our striving to make wealth qurbatan ila Allah ta'ala, to gain nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by striving to buy ethical forms of clothing and everything, right? And like I said, they're not cheap. So the person who wants to live a life in which they're buying the most eco-friendly, most ethical brands, you're going to need a lot of money. But everyone's striving for it anyways, but you're striving for it for the wrong reasons, not for godly reasons. So that's a good goal for us to have in mind, to actually know where we're getting our products from. It's very important. It's very important. We have an obligation as Muslims who believe that we are representatives of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this earth. We've been given this task by the divine. We have a responsibility towards our fellow human beings. And we have a responsibility towards the natural world. Don't think that we can take this lightly. Sheikh Bajat used to say that we cannot claim to have Iman if we don't think about the Muslims in China. I mentioned this before, meaning the Muslims that generally people don't think about. So we have to be ethical in every facet of our lives. So 11% of the world's children are forced into child labor. Another report says that 60% of workers at the mills it investigated in India were under 18. Countries with the highest rate of laborers in the sector include India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Nepal. It is known that 51 countries use child labor. 51 countries. Child labor. H&M, Forever 21, Nike, Gap, Zara, Urban Outfitters, Aldo, Adidas, Victoria's Secret, Aeropostale, Apple, they all use child. In fact, the iPhone, I think the iPhone XR, was completely made by children in school. I forgot what it was, middle school or high school. The whole phone, completely made by children in China. We have to take this into consideration, right, when we are purchasing products, because when we have that wealth, that's an amana from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We want to live a morally up. We say, well, nobody sees my efforts. God is seeing your effort. This is how we gain clarity and piety, and we live a clean life. A clean life. You know, there's a lot of things within our lives, we don't realize how they affect us. We don't realize how they affect us. Many people don't understand this, that the mustahabbat and the makruhat, with regards to your behavior at home, can influence whether you commit a sin or not. Why? Because there are two forces at work on this earth. You have, apart from your enemy, which is the self, you have the shayateen and you have the malaika, you have the angels. All right? Now the angels have a certain number within the home. The shayateen also have a certain number within the home. Certain practices that we do within the home can increase the amount of shayateen within the home. And if their number increases, their whispers also increase. The arguments increase in the home. Their presence increases in the home. Our desires are also increased. Our sins, in turn, also increase. So that's why the mustahabbat and the makruhat in the home are important. Take out the garbage from the house. If you have oily pots and pans, make sure that you wash them. Don't leave trash around your room. It attracts certain forces. That's why there's ad'iyah before we go into the bathroom. Right? There's ad'iyah with regards to, or riwayat with regards to what to read before you sleep. Not everything is about being seen. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Imam Ali alayhi salam continues, I advise you, O servants of Allah, that you should have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it is a right of Allah over you. And it creates your right over Allah, and that you should seek Allah's help in it, and its help in meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, taqwa isn't like a independent soul, individual endeavor. Meaning that when we want to gain proximity to God, I have to do this. This is something that, a journey I have to go on. So no, you're going on this journey, but the success of this journey depends on you communicating with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on a daily basis. He's the one that grants you that success, because the goal and the destination of this journey is God. You want to reach Him, right? So He's the goal. He determines whether you can gain entrance or not. So you have to have that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to seek God's help in preserving that taqwa. Taqwa is a protection, but not from everything. This is one of the slides I have over here, but we've mentioned this already. So taqwa can protect the individual, but there are certain situations that it doesn't protect you from. Certain situations that it can't protect you per se. Generally, it can protect you. One of them is sexual desire. And that's where the Sharia comes in. That's why they say that the opposite gender should not be alone in one room. One male and one female alone in one room. Even if that person has taqwa, it's extremely difficult. You have to get out of that scenario, or what? That desire will overcome you. So that's why the Sharia is there. Those laws are there to protect the individual. The Sharia protects you, and taqwa also protects you. And that's why it's makruh as well for a person to sleep alone. Meaning if they're in a house, to be asleep on their own. I remember in the seminary when one of the students' wives would travel because it was student housing, it was a rule that that individual had to move back into the dorms. Couldn't be allowed to sleep on his own in the apartment that was provided by the seminary. That's how seriously they took it. Or a brother had to invite 2 or 3 brothers to sleep in the house, right? Because it's a reality. They take it seriously. They don't hear قال الصادق قال الباقر قال الله عز وجل and they say, oh, okay, well, they dismiss it. They take it seriously. This is a reality. When we hear these words, it's supposed to compel us into action. God is telling you this is a fire. It's going to burn down everything. And so you react as if you saw a fire. And that's why the mustahab and makruh as well are important to adhere to. Imam Ali alayhi salam continues, certainly taqwa, and remember these words. I'm sure when you hear these words, they're going to resonate in your mind, these descriptions. Certainly taqwa is the medicine for your hearts, sight for the blindness of your spirits, the cure for the ailments of your bodies, the rectifier of the evils of your chests, the purifier of the pollution of your minds, the light of the darkness of your eyes, the consolation for the fear of your heart, and the brightness for the gloom of your ignorance. All these things are what? A result of having what? Piety, taqwa. That self-restraint. That's what it leads to. That self-restraint is what gives you that clarity in your mind. It's what is the medicine for your heart. You ever feel like you look in between you and yourself and you say to yourself, I feel like this is a sickness, the fact that, I can't get my life together. I feel weak. A person who feels they can't get their life together feels like they have a form of disability or that they're sick. They say, why can't I achieve? Every time I try, I fail. And deep down, I know I'm the reason. I procrastinate a lot. It's a simple task, but I can never get it done. For the life of me, I keep trying and I can't get it done. Saying this is the answer. That if you don't have piety, the opposite is going to happen. Medicine for your hearts, you're going to become sick if you don't have piety. Sight for the blindness of your spirit, you're going to become blind if you don't have piety. Cure for the ailments of your bodies. What does he mean by cure for the ailments of you? How does taqwa cure your body? Because you don't have stress. Because a person who has taqwa reaches a state of happiness, reaches a state of serenity, reaches a state of certainty. That doubt, that shak, that plagues one's soul leads to a very stressful life. Everything stresses you out. Work, money, other things. Person who has certainty that God is, so long as God is, what's there to worry about? So long as God is, and He is the sustainer and the provider, why should I worry about my rizq? It's going to come to me if I'm putting my effort in. But you put the effort in and you go to work and you worry at the end of the month. And if you didn't make do, what's worrying about it going to do for you? You're only stressing yourself out. You have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala you can resort on. That's why a pious individual lives a less stressful life in reality. Doesn't matter what takes place, they're able to endure. Because God is, because they can return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's how it's a cure for the ailment of your body. A lot of the diseases come from what? Stress. Stress begins to destroy you. You look at somebody's eyes, somebody's face, they look older than their age, they look tired. They can't even laugh. You try to get yourself to feel any sort of emotion. You go on YouTube, you put something to laugh, you go on your phone. Why? Because you want to feel again. It's been so long since I've been able to feel anything, let alone happy. And if I feel happy, it feels so short-lived. He says, this is how it cures the ailment of your body. The rectifier of the evils of your chest is piety is what rectifies whatever damage you've done to yourself, right? Because there's damage that happens from the outside. That's trauma that comes in from our environment, from our upbringing and so on. And there's trauma that we've been inflicting upon ourselves by our self-destructive habits. Habits that we get involved in that begin to break us down as individuals, begin to destroy us as individuals. Meaning you feel that there's something within you. Every time you strive to do good in your life, it doesn't last a day or two. And why? Not because of outside reasons. You're the reason. You are the reason for your failure. You begin to destroy your life with your own hands. And you start to ask yourself, why do I do this? It's as if I don't want myself to ever succeed or be happy. Or my fear leads me to self-destruction. Right? So here it says that taqwa rectifies the evils of your chest. Whatever trauma you've inflicted, whatever damage you've inflicted, it rectifies it. There is a way to mend yourself and bring yourself back to that strength. The light of the darkness of your eyes. Person who has that light is able to see the way. I don't know what to do. I feel like, the world is coming down on me. It says the person who has light doesn't feel that way. They see the path. They see the way. It's clear. At least they know. If they don't know where it is on the long run, they don't have that much light. It's not that bright. They know at least what the next step is going to be. They know where to place their foot for the next step to move forward. The consolation for the fear of your heart. When you are going through stress and you get those thoughts and those ideas, you become scared. You have fear within your heart. You're scared that there's no way out. You're scared that it's never going to change. You're scared that you're always going to be that person, that you're never going to get out of this, and that it's too late, and that you've built, it's such a heavy burden, heavy to carry. He says, this is the consolation for the fear of your heart. That piety is what gives you hope. You know that little by little, you're able to overcome, you're able to strengthen yourself, and you're able to what? Move forward. It gives you hope because you see, well, you know what? I am succeeding little by little. I am rectifying myself little by little. There is hope in me. In the brightness for the gloom of your ignorance. Knowledge is a light. Knowledge is described as a light. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, don't think that knowledge is what you receive in books. Knowledge is a light that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts within the hearts of the individuals that He decides, He chooses. So taqwa leads to that ma'rifah, leads to that type of knowledge. And a person with knowledge cannot compare to one with ignorance. A person with knowledge can be a better decision maker, can take better steps, can move in a better direction. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and whoever is wary of Allah, whoever has, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ, whoever has taqwa, that's what wary of Allah. Whoever is wary of Allah, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ, He shall make a way out for him and provide him from whence he does not reckon. You're worried all the doors are closed? God's saying, have taqwa. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. God will make you a way out. When all the doors seems closed, that taqwa is going to lead to the light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to provide that light. It's going to lead you out in a way you've never imagined. Most people understand this because there's multiple scenarios you've been in your life where you felt all the doors were closing, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that saves you in a way you've never imagined, in the most beautiful way. In another verse, if you are wary of Allah, He shall appoint a criterion for you. So here it means if you have taqwa. إِن تَتَّقُوا اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ فُرْقَانًا. If you have taqwa, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you have piety, that self-restraint, God will show you which way to go. God will show you truth from falsehood. You say, I can't tell. It's very confusing. I don't know which way to go. I'm worried because I don't want to make the wrong decision. He says, have that self-restraint. I will show you the next step. I will show you the next way. And another verse, and whoever puts his trust in Allah, He will suffice him. Indeed, Allah carries through His command. Certainly, Allah has set a measure for everything. Right? And whoever puts his trust in Allah, He will suffice him. So this is about rizq. Rizq can be financial, it can be knowledge, it can be many things. It can be children. Rizq is blessings, gifts from Allah. So everything is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, you're worried about money, you have self-restraint, you stop yourself. You know that there's a way to make that money, but it's not the halal way. You know that there's a job that, one of the options that you have, it pays more, but it puts you in a bad position, spiritually speaking. You might be around an atmosphere that's not suitable for a mu'min or a mu'minah. But that pay can cover your bills. They have other options, but they're not the best, and they won't cover your bills. God's saying, Have that taqwa, have that piety. Choose me, I'll take care of it for you. I will suffice you. Make that decision, make that choice. Because I set a measure for everything. I decide when it rains, when it doesn't rain. I decide when the planets turn and when they rotate. I decide how the atoms work. I decide how the laws work. All these, God is the sustainer of everything. He set all the, هو مسبب الأسباب. He is the one who sets the reasons. He is the source. I said, I'm the source for everything. Where are you going? Why are you putting your trust in that employer? Put your trust in me, and I'll provide for you. Don't worry. Show me that you're patient. I will get you out. And another verse, and whoever is wary of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He shall grant him ease in his affairs. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِ يُسْرًا. God will make your affairs, your problems, He'll make whatever you're facing easier for you. If you have that piety, you'll see that before I didn't know what to do. Before I had so much fear, and I seek refuge in Allah. I told Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm scared. I don't know what to do in this situation. I feel I'm in over my head. Take me out of it. Have that trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not going to make a decision until you take care of it for me. Show me the way. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it so easy and so smooth. Where you had hesitation before, you'll be able to go into that interview, you'll be able to be put into that scenario, and when you make the decision, you won't second guess yourself. You say, I made that decision with certainty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's covered. He covered me. I'm good to go. In a lot of situations, it's like that. You have fear. You don't know what's the right choice to make. God's saying, have taqwa, and I will make your affairs easy for you. So it brings about, taqwa brings about balance and harmony. And I'll end with this. The balance and harmony, where does it come from? He said that the power that is supposed to be superior in your soul is what? Your intellect. Now, what happens if I don't take care of my intellect? What happens if I give in to my desires? I take other things lightly. Imagine it's like being in a room and all these four powers are voices. And if they're talking over one another, and the weakest voice in the room is your intellect is never going to be listened to. Say your intellect was in my position, and I'm supposed to be the speaker, but everybody else was speaking loudly. And your voices were louder than mine. Nobody would be able to hear my voice. Likewise, your intellect is the same way. That's what taqwa, self-restraint entails. It entails quietening the other voices within your mind. Any of your desires, those intrusive thoughts, so that you can finally hear your intellect. Your intellect can be listened to and obeyed by what? By your body, by yourself. So when I take things loosely and I let my sins take over and my desires take over, it becomes that their voice is the prominent voice. And my weakest voice becomes my intellect. So multiple desires equals multiple voices. When self-interest appears, this is a poem by Rumi. When self-interest appears, virtue becomes hidden. 100 veils rise from the heart to the eye. 100 veils rise from the heart to the eye. We put veils on ourselves. I've taken up a lot of your time, inshallah. We will continue the discussion tomorrow night. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.